Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about the grey and the white matter of the spinal cord. Now first of all, this is the cross section of the spinal cord. Okay, and when we will do this, we will be able to see two matters. There is a grey matter, this is the grey matter, and outside this is the white matter. This whole is the white matter. Right, now in the spinal cord. Now this is the grey matter. This one is the grey matter. The H-shaped structure is over here, is the grey matter. Right. Now in the cross section of the cord, the grey matter is actually seen as H-shaped or butterfly-shaped fluted column extending throughout the length of the spinal cord. And remember, it is divided into symmetrical right and the left comma-shaped masses, which is connected across the midline by a structure known as the transverse grey commissures. What are transverse grey commissures? It actually connects this right and the left structures together and divides them also. So this is the anterior and this is the posterior grey commissure. Okay, we actually connect these two commas or these two structures of the grey matters. Right. Now the central canal of the spinal cord actually passes through the center of this grey commissure from over here. Right. And the canal is actually surrounded by, remember, substantia gelatinosa centralis. So now remember, this canal is actually surrounded by the substantia gelatinosa centralis. Now the lateral comma-shaped masses over here of the grey masses is actually further divided by transverse grey commissure into two main horns, that is the anterior horn and the posterior horn. Because of this transverse grey commissure, this whole grey mass is divided into two main horns. There is the anterior and the posterior horns. The posterior horn is narrow and elongated, as you can see, but this anterior horn is actually broader. Now important thing, remember, in the thoracic region and the upper two lumbar segment, that means from T1 to L2, a triangular projection over here, as you can see, it actually juts out from the side of the lateral grey mass between the anterior and the posterior horn of the grey matter, right, nearly opposite to the transverse grey commissure, and this is known as the lateral grey horn. Triangular projection mainly in the mainly from T1 to L2 segments only. Okay, and the posterior horns are actually connected to the surface by gelatinous substance called substantia gelatinosa. We know the amount of the grey matter and the amount of the white matter actually varies from different columns of the spinal cord, right? The amount of the grey matter and the shapes of its horn and amount of white matter varies at different levels. Now, okay, now look at this diagram now. This is the transverse section of different level of the spinal cord. Now the amount of grey matter seen in a particular level is actually different as compared to the other level, and at a particular level it is actually well correlated with the masses of the tissue it supplies. So means amount of grey matter will be more in that particular spinal cord, which will actually supply more of the muscle masses. Therefore it is maximum in the region of the cervical and the lumbar enlargement. I told you before in my spinal cord 1 video only that the cervical and the lumbar enlargement are those areas in the spinal cord which actually expanded and swelled up. Okay, we can say it is thicker in diameter as compared to the rest. Why? Because they actually having a large amount of motor neuron horns, and as because of that they are actually larger in size. And why they are elongated or why they are actually large in structure? Because it supplies larger amount of the musculature of the upper and the lower limb of the body and also the associated girdles. So remember, this grey matter is mainly enlarged in such region where the musculature of the body, especially the upper and the lower limb, are supplied. That means the cervical enlargement and the lumbar enlargement of the spinal cord. So just refer my that video for particular explanation of this. Now the amount of the white matter undergoes progressive increment from below to upward, means from the lower segment to the upper segments, means the upper segment actually having large amount of white matter as compared to the lower segment. Why? Because there are mainly two reasons. Because progressively more and more ascending fibers are added to the cord from below upward. I told you before only in my previous video that the spinal cord actually have two main tracks or two main fibers, that means the ascending and the descending one. So remember, in the upward or in the upper segments, the more and more ascending fibers are added to the cord. Okay, while the number of descending fibers decreases in the cord from above downward. So that's why the amount of white matter is more in the cervical as compared to the sacral. As you can see, in the cervical region we are having more amount of white matter, while the sacral it is the least one. So as you go from above downwards, the amount of white matter decreases. Okay, and remember the grey matter is mainly in the larger amount at mainly two places, remember, or largest in the two regions, that is cervical and the lumbar enlargements. Now structure of the grey matter. Now it mainly consists of three main things, that is the nerve cell, neuroglia and the blood vessels. Now the neurons in the grey matter. Now the neurons over here are classified mainly into two categories, that means structural classification and functional classification. Now first of all, structural classification, in that we have mainly two types, that is the Golgi type 1 and the Golgi type 2. In the Golgi type 1, the axons are comparatively longer, and the Golgi type 2, the axons are shorter. Now over here in the Golgi type 1, the axons actually leave the grey matter of the spinal cord and they actually join to the anterior nerve root of the spinal cord and then forms the nerve tract. Okay, while the Golgi type 2, they don't leave the grey matter of the spinal cord and remain intrasegmental or intersegmental in position. So this will leave the spinal cord or the grey matter and this will not. Now the functional classification of the neurons. There are mainly of three types: motor neuron, sensory neuron and the interneuron. Now first of all, this motor neuron. Motor neuron is actually present in the anterior and the lateral horn of the spinal cord. Sensory neurons in the posterior horn of the spinal cord, with the interneuron mainly present throughout the spinal cord. So this in the anterior and the lateral horn, this in the posterior horn and interneuron in the whole spinal cord. Now remember, this motor neuron are actually present in the anterior and the lateral horn, and there are mainly of the two types, that is the alpha and the gamma type in the anterior grey column. Remember, in the anterior grey horn or anterior grey side of the column, there are mainly of two types, that is the alpha and the gamma. Now remember, these alpha neurons, they are large multipolar cells, while these gamma are the small multipolar cells. Remember, the neurons in the grey matter are all multipolar only. Remember, all the neurons in the grey matter are all multipolar only, right? But over here, remember, the alpha is the larger one, while the gamma is the smaller multipolar one. Now this alpha actually supply the extrafusal skeletal muscles. Okay, and this gamma actually supply the intrafusal muscle fiber of the neuromuscular spindle of the skeletal muscle. Now next is sensory neuron. They are mainly present in the posterior horn, and remember, they will form ascending tract in the brain and the intersegmental tract in the spinal cord to relay the sensory impulse to them. Okay, so they will form ascending tract in the brain and intersegmental tract in the spinal cord to relay the sensory impulses. Now the interneuron present throughout the spinal cord, and remember, they actually connect different types of the neurons, and that's why they are also known as the association neurons. Now they are either inhibitory or excitatory and concerned with the integration of segmental activities. So they are mainly excitatory or inhibitory and also concerned with mainly the integration of segmental activities. Now the nerve cell group in the grey column of cord. Now what are these? These are the nerve cell groups. Now these neurons actually grouped in the grey column of the spinal cord, and they are mainly of two types: cell group in the anterior grey column and cell group in the posterior grey column. Now cell group in the anterior grey column, they are mainly of three groups: medial group, this one, central group and the lateral group. Now first of the medial group. Medial group, remember, actually is present in the medial side, of course. Okay, and this actually present along the whole length of the spinal cord and innervates the axial musculature of the neck and the trunk, and this is further subdivided into ventromedial and dorsomedial parts. Okay, so remember, this actually supplies or innervates the axial musculature, means our trunk and the neck. Now the lateral group, this one, actually confines in the cervical and the lumbosacral enlargement. That means, of course, it will supply the limb muscles. Why? Because they are actually present in the lumbar and the cervical enlargement. The central group, this is the central group, and it has mainly three nucleus, that is the phrenic nucleus, lumbosacral nucleus and the spinal nucleus. Now this phrenic nucleus actually is present from C3 to C5 level, and it actually innervates the diaphragm. Now next is lumbosacral nucleus. Now this actually is present in the lumbosacral region, that means from L2 to S3. Okay, in the mainly the lumbosacral region, L2 to S3, and its function is unknown so far. Okay, but remember, L2 to S3, and this from C3 to C5. And this spinal nucleus of the accessory cranial nerve, that is the 11th cranial nerve, accessory cranial nerve in the millennial cervical region, extends from C1 to C5 and gives origin to spinal root of accessory nerve. So this spinal nucleus of accessory nerve in the cervical region from C1 to C5 gives origin to spinal root of accessory nerve. So this actually in short gives the main function is giving origin to spinal root of accessory nerve. Over here the function is not known, and over here it supplies the or innervates the diaphragm. Now the cell groups in the posterior gray column means this one. Now first of all, the substantia gelatinosa, this is at the apex of the posterior horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. Now this is situated in the apex of the gray column and extends throughout the length of the spinal cord. It is composed of, remember, small Golgi type 2 neurons, also known as the interneurons. And it receives afferent fiber. Remember this, it actually receives afferent fibers of lateral division of the posterior nerve root and senses pain and temperature. Senses is very important, pain and temperature, and receives the afferent fiber of lateral division of posterior nerve root. And over here, remember, the substantia gelatinosa is continuous above with the nucleus of spinal tract of trigeminal nerve. Now next is the nucleus proprius. That means this one. This is nucleus proprius present anterior to the substantia gelatinosa and receives the fiber from the posterior white column. Over here, it actually receives the fiber afferent fibers from the posterior nerve root only with the lateral division. And over here, it will take fiber from the posterior white column. And remember, it constitutes the main bulk of the cell present in the posterior gray column. It extends along the whole length of the spinal cord and receives the fiber from the posterior white column and senses the proprioception. What is this? It is actually the sense of position and movement, 2-point discrimination and vibration. Now nucleus dorsalis or the Clark's column. Now this nucleus dorsalis is actually present over here. As you can see, this is the nucleus dorsalis Clark's column, medial part of the base of the this posterior horn of the spinal cord or the gray matter of the spinal cord. Extends from the C8 to L2 or L3 level and receives proprioceptive afferent fibers, extroceptive afferent fibers from the trunk and the lower limb. Now the visceral afferent nucleus, it is present somewhere over here. Okay, in this diagram it is not shown, but it is actually present somewhere over here. It is actually located lateral to the nucleus dorsalis, lateral to this. Okay, and extends from T1 to L2 and from S2 to S4 and receives visceral afferent from the dorsal nerve roots. Now the cell group in the lateral gray column, they are mainly two, intermediolateral and the intermediomedial. So first of all, in the intermediolateral nucleus actually extends from T1 to L2 segments of the cord and give origin to, remember, preganglionic fiber of sympathetic nervous system. That means, remember, this sympathetic nervous system includes the thoracolumbar outflow which leave the cord along with the anterior nerve roots. So it actually gives origin to preganglionic fiber of sympathetic nervous system, that means thoracolumbar segment or thoracolumbar outflow. And the intermediomedial actually extend from the S2 to S4 and give origin to preganglionic fiber of the parasympathetic nervous system, that means the sacral outflow, and also passes through the anterior nerve root of the corresponding sacral nerve. So remember, sympathetic, thoracolumbar and parasympathetic sacral outflow. Now the laminar architecture of the gray matter or the rexed lamina. Now we have divided this horn, anterior, lateral and the posterior horn, into further 10 laminas. Okay, now which are these 10 laminas? These are actually from 1 to 10. The first one is the postromarginal nucleus. Second one is the substantia gelatinosa of Ronaldo. Third and fourth are the nucleus proprius. Fifth and sixth, remember, fifth and sixth are the base of the dorsal column. Base of the dorsal column. Seventh one is the intermediate gray column. That means it is actually having intermediolateral cell column and intermediomedial cell column, which studied over here. These are the cell of the lateral gray column. Okay, so within the seventh one, this intermediate gray column or the lateral gray column types actually come. Okay, intermediate gray column include the intermediolateral gray column and the intermediomedial gray column, and also it will be having the Clark's column or the nucleus dorsalis. Now the lamina number 8th and 9th, remember 8th and 9th are the medial and the lateral group of the nuclei of the anterior gray column. If you remember, we are having mainly 3 columns in the anterior part, medial, center and the lateral. So the 8th and 9th we are having the medial and the lateral one. And in the 10th one, remember, we are having the gray commissure. The gray commissure over here, as you can see. The 10th one is the gray commissure. So 1 is the postero-marginal nucleus. 2 is the substantiality of the Ronaldo. 3 and 4 are Nucleus ProPrius. 5th and 6th, remember, the dorsal column we can say. Okay, 5th and 6th are the base of dorsal column. And the 7th is the intermediate. This 7th is the intermediate gray column, including intermediate lateral and the intermediate medial. And the Clark's column over here. Then the 8th and 9th. This 8th and the 9th one actually have the anterior part or the anterior horn structure. That means the medial and the lateral column. And this one, this both. Okay, and the 10th one is actually having the transverse gray commissure. Now the white matter. The types of fibers in the white matter are mainly 3: sensory, motor and association. In the sensory, mainly include the central processes of the sensory neuron of the spinal cord of the posterior root ganglion. Remember, of the posterior root ganglion, which enters the spinal cord and ascends or descends for a varying length. Now, they also have ascending fibers from the nuclei of the spinal gray column. Ascending fibers from the nuclei of the spinal gray column that convey sensory modalities to the higher centers. Right. Now, in the motor, they mainly include descending fibers. Over here, we are having the ascending fibers. Well, over in the motor, we will be having the descending fiber from the higher centers to the spinal cord. Remember. And they also include the nerve fibers of anterior and the lateral horn cell that go to the motor roots of the spinal nerves. And the association, they actually originate and end within the spinal cord only, and they mostly interconnect the neurons of the same segment or of different segmental levels. So they mainly actually originate and end within the spinal cord only because they interconnect the neurons. Now the division of the white matter. The white matter is mainly divided into, remember, 3 main columns, that is the posterior dorsal column, the anterior ventral column and the lateral white column. Now in the posterior dorsal column, they are mainly present between the posterior median septum. This is the posterior median septum and the posterior horn. Now this lateral column actually present between the anterior and the posterior horns. This is the anterior horn, this is the posterior horn, so present between these two. And the anterior white column between the anterior median fissure, means this one, and the anterior horn. So posterior between the fissure and the posterior horn, anterior between the fissure and the anterior horn, and lateral between the posterior and the anterior horn. The anterior white column are joined together by the white commissure. This is the white commissure. This is the gray commissure, transverse commissure. This is the white commissure or anterior white commissure. Okay, and each white column is actually made up of tracts which are either ascending or descending. Well, ascending will be the sensory and descending will be the motor. So this was all about the gray matter and the white matter of the spinal cord. Hope you did well. Thank you so much.